I'm not happy.
I don't need Elizabeth Warren or the government giving away my money.
Calling Mike Bloomberg an oligarch has implications in this country that I think are unfair and unreasonable.
I care. That's it.
Makes you think of some rich person who got their money off of oil in Russia, who's taking advantage of a broken and dysfunctional system.
Bernie Sanders saying, the country's corrupt, our system's corrupt. Be careful about that language, Bernie. You know, be careful.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
Now witness the firepower of this fully armed and operational battle station.
Wet ass P word.
I like my meat tight.
Big, massive dumps.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. Around the Nation right here. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Wow, news day. Fun times. So we got a lot of different stories. I didn't originally plan on talking about what's going on in the DC Capitol. I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to touch on it too much. But there was a bomb threat at the Capitol today. And of course, it turned out to be a right-winger, somebody who's been propagandized, of course, by Fox News and conservative media, believed in the big lie, et cetera, et cetera. But I actually did find something that's really interesting about that. And the fact, of course, that this is somebody who is, by all definitions, a right-wing domestic terrorist. Look, the news on that, of course, is that happened earlier today. This person allegedly said that there were different devices around Washington, D.C., I think 4 or 5, and that he's ready to go to war. He's ready to have a revolution, okay? And so that didn't happen, thankfully. Nobody was hurt, and the man is now in custody. Now, what I found really interesting about this, and this was for some early reporting, right? He was doing a live stream in his truck, as a lot of right-wingers tend to do. But, like, there was something that was interesting here that I noticed. In the video, he was talking about health insurance. Well, health insurance? Wait, what do you mean? What? Wait. Apparently, he said that his health insurance, wasn't paying for his treatments. Injections in his knees so that he's able to walk. He said when he went to the doctor, the insurance wouldn't cover him, and went on to say that when his wife developed skin cancer, insurance decided not to cover that either because they considered it cosmetic. And so as a result, he said his wife had to have her nose practically removed as a result of that. And so I'm reading all this stuff, and I'm like, well, that's fascinating and disastrous. Because here we have someone who is a heavily propagandized MAGA chud, essentially, right? Again, somebody who, has some pretty abhorrent / wrong beliefs on things like, of course, the election. He thought he was one of those people that believed Pillow Guy. The election stolen by China. Joe Biden didn't win. But then you look at that and you look at the media that he's consuming, and then the actual real world issues that he faced. And you start to think, wait a minute. So obviously there's a big connection between his beliefs and, of course, conservative media and his beliefs, and as well as lack of health care in his personal situation. So how much do you want to bet that this guy loved private insurance until they pulled what he claims on him? Hey, that's maybe. Or more apt, I think I would put it, how much did he hate socialism? I think that's a better way to put that, because you could be damn sure that this is somebody who is heavily propagandized to love the private industry and to believe that the government can't do anything right, and the government should stay out of our lives and out of our healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, here we have a situation where socialized healthcare in the form of, whether it be Medicare for all or a complete national takeover of the healthcare system like they have in the UK and other countries, where they have a national health service. So the government basically runs the hospitals, and as well as the payments and insurance and all that, would have actually helped him. It's life comes at you fast. And there's a lot of irony in this entire thing, because this is somebody who supported people, politicians specifically, and a point of view, a political point of view, that was anti himself, anti his own life, and actually worked against him in the times, and his family in the times that they needed. And literally, I think part of this is, the radicalization by, of course, right-wing conservative media, along with his own health problems, his finances, life spinning out of control. Again, this is without a whole lot of background information, and more stuff will, of course, come out about this. And if that's the case, I'm more than happy to go back and revisit this and say, okay, I was wrong about that or whatever. But right now, from the information that I know, our brutal healthcare system crushed this guy, who, again, is a victim of it, but also perpetuated that very same system by voting for conservatives and conservative politicians who are against healthcare, and as well as, of course, railing against things like socialism, and which actually would have, again, helped his family. So it was really interesting. It really is interesting. And it's a sad story all around, because, again, here you see that result of radicalization when it seems like people have nothing to lose. That's how understand, one of the reasons that people go down this right-wing pipeline is, for one, the propaganda, and for two, they're looking for something. They're looking for some sort of meaning, some sort of help, something to hold on to. And that's where the radicalization begins, and it usually ends up taking you down to a very, very dark place, which, unfortunately, that seems to be the situation here. From what I know. The only things they care about are abortion and owning libs. They don't care about the economic consequences. There's those super partisans that absolutely do. And the conservative media figures, absolutely, they don't give a damn about abortion. And the politicians, it's all about the own of the day, and trying to, of course, get the support from those people in order to get donations or to win elections. So yeah, it really is. It really is sort of a sad yet uniquely, I think, American story. All right. I'll probably do some more reporting on it tomorrow if, new information came out. Obamacare helped many people like him. Look at West Virginia. The coal miners would have no health insurance if not for Obamacare. Look, okay, so I don't disagree with that, but I also do. I mean, yes, the ACA did help people. Of course it did. There's lots of evidence and data showing that it was, for the country, mostly a net positive. But there were also huge, huge downsides with the ACA that I've gotten into plenty of times before. That being, of course, leaving private insurance in charge of the entire thing as the central focus of your so-called universal healthcare system, which if you leave it in private hands, never really becomes universal because there is always that barrier of not being able to have enough money. And of course, you can fault some Republican governors, of course, for not expanding Medicaid and things like that. And so that's definitely fair criticism. I still think, of course, even with the net benefit that the ACA has brought, it's once again not nearly enough. We needed to expand it to Medicare for all a long time ago. And the fact that we haven't, we still have systems, we still have stories like this. This wouldn't happen under single payer. This wouldn't happen if we had control, a better system than the one that we had that leaves, private profits in the hands of these corporations and basically leaves us at the whim of these large insurers. I know you get it, but I just wanted to kind of make a distinction here. All right. That said, we do have more stuff. So let's do it. Let's start out with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene went on a completely unhinged, expletive-filled rant against Joe Biden. So now I'm going to show you a really, really small snippet of it because, well, most of it's on Gitter, and I don't want to Gitter some viruses from going to Gitter or get hacked or anything like that. But I will show you this little piece so you can kind of get the gist of her whole video. Take a look.
Joe Biden, you're not a president. You're a piece of shit.
All right, so she adds in the the Gitter video, she says thousands of Americans are stuck over there in Afghanistan, and you're letting the Taliban kick your ass while you're lecturing governors about masks and mandates. Do your job. Bring these Americans home. All right, so I got a couple of things that I want to say, and some important points and some not so important points. So we'll go through it. So for one, well, he is the president. That's it. He's a president. He is the president of the United States. That fact is unequivocal. I know. She means in the concept of, or the context of, well, he's not a leader because we got people stuck in Afghanistan. Oh, okay. Well, what about when, of course, Donald Trump? I know I'm doing whataboutism here already, but Donald Trump also left people in Syria when we didn't defend our allies, the Kurds. We just kind of left them. Okay. Anything about that? Anything about that? No, of course not. But let's go to the relevant parts here. All right. So for one, we're not at war with the Taliban anymore. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. And we don't want to be at war. That's something that the American people, both Democrats and Republicans, tend to agree with. We didn't want to be at war with the Taliban in Afghanistan. And so we support the pullout from Afghanistan. And so, all right. That said, she brings in, for some reason, masks and vaccines as if that has anything to do with anything, what she's talking about. And third, of course, there should be a focus, and there is a focus, on bringing Americans home from Afghanistan as well as Afghan allies. So now there are some significant problems with doing so. Right now, administration officials say that some 10,000 to 15,000 U.S. citizens are still currently in Afghanistan. So that's a lot of people to get out. Understand that that's going to take a lot of time. And so it's not a good situation. So now, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin made some statements about this in a press conference. He said that the first priority was to evacuate, quote, all American citizens who want to get out of Afghanistan. And the second was, of course, to get out as many as possible, the Afghans who work with U.S. forces and could now be in danger. And so, of course, that's incredibly obvious. Yes, that should be the goal. That is the goal. Great. We knew a whole bunch of people wanted to leave prior to Biden taking office. Both administrations dropped the ball. And I agree with that. I do agree with that. Now, of course, Austin added, the U.S. forces in Afghanistan currently lacked the capability to pick up the large numbers of Americans stranded in Kabul, and bringing them to the airport. So this is more like a logistical challenge. All right. Well, now, this could have been mitigated with some better planning, both from the Trump administration as well as the Biden administration. All right. So there's fair criticism to go around for both. And no, it may sound like I'm trying to both sides of the thing, but in this situation, there is nuance, and both sides do happen to have some fault. With, of course, Biden thinking that he had more time than he actually did, and Trump just literally not planning anything at all. Just like, LOL, get out of the Afghanistan, you know, kind of shooting from the hip on that, even though on the policy position, he's absolutely right. We should have gotten Afghanistan, and it was good that we were out of Afghanistan. All right. So now, what do we do about it? Well, one thing, I know what we can't do, send in more troops. Let's not do that. In fact, we already have over 5,000 U.S. troops that Biden had sent in, helping operations in the Kabul airport. So we don't really want to send more. As Austin noted, that the administration does not want to send troops into Kabul because it would risk more conflict with the Taliban, and said that the State Department was in touch with the Taliban through diplomatic channels in order to ensure that U.S. passport holders would be able to travel to the airport. The Taliban is currently facilitating that agreement. And look, I get not wanting to trust him. I don't trust him. Joe Biden did a recent interview, and he's like, yeah, I don't trust him. But again, we don't really want to start a new conflict with them and get mired there for another 20 years. That's the last thing the American people want to do. Now, of course, if you ask the defense contractors, well, they're more than happy to sign us up for another 20 years, or war hawks that are on the media, etc. But for now, Joe Biden's like, no, we're not interested. All right, I do want to get out of here. And so the whole point, of course, of doing things the way that we're doing, even though it's not great, but is to try to get as many people out as fast as you can without people shooting at each other, which would, of course, make things even worse. So you don't want to send the troops, right? As for Biden goes, again, Washington has pledged to evacuate all the remaining American citizens, along with an additional 50 to 65,000 Afghans, such as former translators for the U.S. military. And of course, that's good. But already, Fox News right-wingers have turned around immediately and said, oh my God, Afghan refugees, how dare you? How dare you bring them all in? All right. So now, again, I think I wish they would have done this sooner, planned it better to get people out, even if they didn't need to, just as a contingency to have something prepared for a quick exit of American citizens and Afghan allies. This was a failure on the part of the Pentagon, obviously, and on Joe Biden. And look, Joe Biden says, hey, I take the blame. The buck stops with me. And big credit to owning that mistake. If you look at some of the other presidents, you think Donald Trump would ever take the blame for anything? Absolutely not. He probably would have blamed Obama. Come on. Now, in an interview, Biden was asked about the situation, and he said, what I thought was, we have to gain control of this. We have to move this more quickly. We have to move in a way in which we can take control of that airport, and we did. And he also said, if there's American citizens left, we're going to stay until we get them all out. All right. Finally, Austin says that at present, the main issue now is processing the people who are already at the airport and seeking evacuation. And of course, the other issue is getting people through the Taliban, and whether or not the Taliban will actually continue to allow people to go through, especially Afghan allies who may not have the passports. And so a lot of that is contingent on what the Taliban does and how much they allow people through. And again, that's where you have this I hate that this is in the hands of this group. If they actually care about their legitimacy as if they care about being a government and becoming, I guess in their terms, a legitimate government, they would try to facilitate the best that they can. I don't know if that's going to happen. Nobody really does. Nobody really does. All right. So now Austin says this, quote, "It's obvious that we're not close to where we want to be in terms of getting the numbers through. So we're going to work that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we're going to get everyone that we possibly can evacuated. And I'll do that as long as we possibly can until the clock runs out or we run out of capability." Now, of course, the agreement is we get out by the end of August. I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know if we're going to meet that deadline. And there is concern there as well. So tough situation, very, very difficult, very tough. But no, look, it's really bad for the people who are still stuck there, who cannot get out. The situation is very volatile, and anything could happen. And it could be, it could be this goes as smoothly as it possibly can, which right now, not very smooth. It's like a bumpy road, or like no pavement whatsoever. But at least we're not hitting gigantic car-sized potholes, which could be the other situation as well. And so I don't know. Now, let's get to the politics of it, obviously. Look, I did segments already where you have Fox News, you have corporate media, CNN, MSNBC, etc., that are basically gloating about Biden's Saigon moment. They can't stop talking about it, right? Oh, it's going to hurt him so badly. Oh, at the Saigon moment, history will never forget. It'll be an albatross around his neck for the rest of eternity. Yeah, okay, right, we get it. Failure, but again, he's accepted that, and he says, I still did the right thing. All right, sticking to his guns, that curmudgeonly streak is actually benefiting now, and actually makes him look a little bit better in this situation, because, again, the American people largely, by far, back this policy decision. All right. That said, you also have some neocons, war hawks that are trying to use what's going on as a basis, to charge back in, to take care of the Taliban and do more endless war. We don't want to go that route. They're even citing now how Afghanistan, how the Taliban is now sitting on $1 trillion of rare resources that the West, America, we need it. We need it. That's what it's always been about, trying to get those rare materials for corporations. We know. All right. So now we have Fox News, mainstream media, beating the war drum, and of course Republicans like Marjorie Taylor Greene, getting back to her, using this to, of course, go after Biden politically because it's good, cheap points. Cheap political points, okay? Let me just note that any other president probably would not have handled this any better because of the way things unfolded. We all knew the Taliban was going to take over, but of course, in mainstream media, among the Pentagon, they actually do, and there's this Washington groupthink that's involved in this. They actually believe that Afghan forces, since they were armed and trained by the best in the world, they have had such a big military, 300,000 strong, backed by advanced U.S. weapons and advanced U.S. training. How could they fall to the Taliban? Again, this is the same military that got beat by Vietnamese farmers hiding in rice paddies with AK-47s. I mean, all the technology and all the the funding and the arms doesn't really matter if you have no will to fight. And that's the very thing. Okay. People who are anti-imperialists, members of the left, we knew that this was going to happen. We knew that the Afghan army was essentially at this point paid mercenaries. And once the money dried up and the United States left, of course, they're going to refuse to fight. What's the point at that point? They had no national identity that coincided with the U.S. puppet government in Kabul. So, that said, finally, one more point, getting back to Greene. What did she do? How has she helped the situation if it's so bad? I mean, it's not like she's not a member of Congress. She's obviously a member of Congress. She could do something, right? Well, she actually did do something. Vice News notes that Green was one of 16 GOP lawmakers who last month voted against increasing the number of visas for Afghans who helped U.S. troops. Oh, oops. So she literally, actively went out of her way to not help, to vote against bringing in more of our allies, people who have helped us in Afghanistan. And is currently doing nothing to help but swearing at Biden at a gym. Classy. Keep it classy, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Keep it classy. Jesus. All right. Now that we're getting out of there, they will create another conflict to satisfy the military contractors and paramilitary groups. Yeah, probably. There always is. Always is. All right. Let's move on. All right. Been a lot of coverage about what's going on in Afghanistan following the U.S. withdrawal after 20 years of endless war. Mainstream media, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, they're all in agreement that everything going on is absolutely terrible, and Biden is at fault, and some have even suggested going back in, guns blazing. So now, for one, it is a bad situation. Nobody wanted the Taliban to take over, but I think, of course, it was inevitable. And while Biden, of course, shares some of the blame, the way that it was done, with the pullout and making bad predictions, the previous president, Donald Trump, also shares some of that blame for putting the Taliban in a pretty strong position for a resurgence. I don't believe any president, of course, would have done better in this situation, but that's not really the focus of the media. Yes, they say, oh, no, we care about the Afghan citizens. What about the poor Afghan citizens? What about them? Okay, well, what about them when they were being abused by Afghan military forces as well? And that whole situation. Oh, we just kind of forgot about that, didn't we? But here's the thing. Mainstream media kind of feigns their indignation at this, at the pullout, at ending this war, because they like to cheerlead for wars. There's a financial incentive. Pentagon, defense contractors, there's a big incentive for that. Not only that, but they, of course, bring in people like war criminals John Bolton and Mike Pompeo, Bill Kristol. They even do little puff pieces on George W. Bush. So all of that stuff, that's what the media is doing. So understand, they're always on the side of pro-imperialism and pro-war. And we see that. The simple fact, though, is that right now, the media is at odds with the American people. The American people, on this policy of Afghanistan, and on many other policies, of course, that the mainstream media, for some reason, thinks that they can sense the soul of the American people and how they would feel about it. Turns out, no, they're absolutely wrong. The American people, just like the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill, well, they're in favor of that. You see on mainstream media, oh, but what about debts? What about deficits? Oh, it's super important. Debt. We got to worry about the debt. No, they don't care about that. No, they actually care about getting things done. They care about good policy, and leaving Afghanistan is good policy, and it's popular with the American people. And even after weeks of fear-mongering about this, about what would happen in Afghanistan if the Taliban took over, and then the media coverage right after that happened, you still have that scaremongering, and yet the American people are still on the side of pulling out of Afghanistan. And let me give you the polls. On Monday, Politico Morning Consult poll found support for withdrawal from Afghanistan had dropped as a result, of course, but still the majority of Americans agree that pulling out was good. Here are the numbers. 49% backed the U.S.'s exit from Afghanistan, while 39% did not. And this is after dropping a whopping 16 points. There's still a majority of Americans that are like, no, good idea. Get out of the wars, end the wars, end the wars. So now, that poll was conducted while Americans were confronted with a weekend of headlines about the Taliban returning to power. And a lot of that, of course, Fox News scaremongering about Muslim refugees coming from Afghanistan. Oh my God, the refugees, they're coming, as well as the idea that now that the Taliban is in control. I've been seeing a lot of segments and reading a lot of articles about, well, now that they're in control of Afghanistan, the Taliban is going to come for the United States. They're going to come for America. Well, we don't know that for sure. I think that's absurd. I think the Taliban, I don't think they're at all interested in attacking the United States now that we're not in the country anymore. And that's an important distinction. Yes, they attacked us when we were there. We were literally occupying the country. Well, now that we're gone, they don't have any reason to attack us. I mean, sure, maybe somebody somewhere is like, vengeance for Allah. But most people, again, they're going to be a little bit smarter than that and say, no, we already dealt with that. They're gone. Let's deal with our own issues. I'm just saying that. Okay. I don't believe that they're an international threat. And so I think that a lot of these media segments are really pro-war posturing from the media in figures who are invested in the military-industrial complex. And that's really what it is. So, yeah. Now, more polls. This is from Data for Progress. It shows that voters still support President Biden's decision to withdraw troops. Even after learning that Taliban fighters captured the cities, voters supported the decision to withdraw by a 14-point margin, including Democrats by a 51-point margin, independents by 13, and nearly a third of Republicans. There were partisan, of course, divisions. Overall, though, the results found 51% of Americans were endorsing the decision to withdraw U.S. troops from Afghanistan, while 37% were opposed to the policy, mostly Republicans, of course. Isn't it funny, though? Most Republicans agreed with pulling out of Afghanistan under Donald Trump. And then as soon as, of course, Biden actually does that and enacts the Trump plan of doing so, or I should say finishes the work, now suddenly right-wingers totally against it. Biden, how could you? How dare you? How dare you? Terrible piece of crap, as Marjorie Taylor Greene had said. You're not a president, piece of trash, garbage. How dare you? It just kind of shows you that, of course, right-wingers don't really have any core beliefs other than going up counter to the libs. So, yeah, that's important, okay? Now, the same survey also found that 55% of the majority of the public also supports the policy of speeding up the process of giving immigrant visas to U.S. allies in Afghanistan. That's good, as opposed to the 30% who believe the administration should take no additional action to bring Afghans here. Again, that's majority Republican who are against that. Because most normal people, most regular voters are like, well, of course we bring people over. They were our allies there. They helped us there in our mission, a doomed mission, but still, their help. They should be given a spot to come to America. They should be welcome. And I agree with that. And yet, even a plurality of Republican voters still sided with the White House in this issue, which is interesting. So understand this is important, okay? This is a really big division between corporate media and the voters, the people. The media is going to continue to push pro-war and talk about horror stories coming out about this, out of Afghanistan, of Taliban rule. And no doubt that it's bad. Taliban rule is not great. And again, we all wish it could have turned out somewhere in a different way. But at the same time, understand that the whole goal of these media outlets and these neocons is to get us back into an endless war. because that means endless profits. And so I think that after 2 failed attempts at nation building, it's time we kind of focus on our own. Our nation needs to be rebuilt, and also to welcome in our allies and anybody who does not want to live under Taliban rule. We should openly welcome them with open arms and build up this country together. All right. All right. So let's move over to COVID. You have a media full of war criminals. They will promote war crimes. That's really it. Nailed it. Nailed it. I can't disagree with that one. That's a good one. Totally true. All right. Governor, let me start that again. All right. All right. Sorry.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Governor Greg Abbott has COVID. All right. So obviously, yes, not exactly a funny issue, but at the same time, kind of hilarious. Now, Governor Greg Abbott had tested positive less than 24 hours after he attended a crowded GOP event that was described as a standing room only event and where there were shockingly no masks. Very, very few masks present. And you wonder what might have happened. Interesting. So now, and okay, what's interesting about this is that Abbott is fully vaccinated. Okay. So he's a breakthrough case and yet had no symptoms, which is good. This shows that the vaccine is working. And yet, for some reason, decided that he was going to be so scared that he would take Regeneron's monoclonal antibody treatment. So, no symptoms, fully vaccinated, but took the treatment anyway. Why? Why? Well, one ICU doctor, an NBC News analyst, decided to weigh in on this. And here's what he tweeted out. Quickly getting access to monoclonal antibody therapy when you're fully vaccinated, asymptomatic governor of Texas, just shows how anxious and scared Greg Abbott actually is of a virus he consistently downplays. Hope Texans take note. Yes, that is pretty interesting, isn't it? So there's important points that I want to touch on this. Okay. For one, he's a breakthrough case, as I mentioned. He got infected anyway because there were people there who were not vaccinated, very likely, and of course, visibly not masked. As simple as that. Yes, you jam a bunch of people in the room without masks, and a lot of them likely without vaccines. Well, you have a chance of getting COVID. The vaccine does not make you 100% immune. But even though you are 95% protected against being hospitalized with serious illness. Most people who get vaccinated and end up with a breakthrough case either develop mild symptoms or no symptoms at all, which is, of course, the case with Governor Abbott. But the thing is, Republicans in Texas especially, but not just in Texas, in Florida, and other states where we're seeing gigantic COVID hotspots, their governors, just like Abbott, have tried to ban mask mandates, vaccine mandates, for private businesses, saying that private businesses cannot cannot say, oh, we require a mask or we require vaccinations for you to come to our establishment. Now, I think that's totally fine. Look, if you require a proof of vaccination, you go to the gym, I think that's totally fine. You're a private business. You decide, okay, look, it's like no shirts, no shoes, no service, no mask, no service. Or if you're going to come in and possibly infect our staff and other people that are here, our customers, well, we're not comfortable with that. And I think they should have the ability to do that, to say whether or not, they want people who are unvaccinated in their establishment. And it's totally fine. But Abbott, of course, has pushed against that, taking them to court. And so that's interesting. Now, Texas, as I mentioned, not doing great with the virus. In fact, according to data, COVID-19 cases have skyrocketed in Texas in recent weeks, from around 1,000 daily cases in July to now over 20,000 cases reported on Monday. So now cases do matter, absolutely. Deaths, again, you're seeing less deaths as a result of people being vaccinated. But remember, in Texas, they have an only 45% vaccination rate, meaning there is a vast majority of Texans who don't have the vaccine. Not good. Not good at all. So on the breakthrough infections, as I mentioned, you are less likely to be hospitalized or die than the unvaccinated. That's why you see lower death numbers and hospitalizations among the vaccinated. If you were unvaccinated, well then, again, the majority of people who are in the hospital or who are dying, somewhere in the high 90s%, well, that's what happens when you don't vaccinate. When you're unvaccinated, you're in the hospital or you die, or both. But if you're vaccinated, you're going to either have mild symptoms, as I said, or no symptoms if you test positive. So now, that said, New York Times published a little bit of a study on breakthrough infections that are on the rise as a result of the Delta variant. They said breakthrough infections in vaccinated people accounted for at least 1 in 5 newly diagnosed cases in 6 weeks in 6 states studied dealing with the new variant. And higher percentages of total hospitalizations and deaths than had been previously observed in all of them, according to figures gathered by the New York Times. I mean, so again, Delta variant, much more infectious, much more likely to get it even if you're vaccinated, but still way less likely to get it than if you were unvaccinated. So obviously, the best way to fight the Delta variant, or at least to slow it down, is to get your vaccine. And yes, if you're in a place with high community spread indoors, wear the mask. That's it. Keep away from large crowds. Socially distance. Had we all done that in the first place, this entire thing might be over. We wouldn't have the Delta variant or any other worse variants that are bound to crop up, thanks to all these new infections. But let's go back to the politics of it. Not only does Greg Abbott decide to do Regeneron when he doesn't need it, but also takes a third vaccine while also saying, you can't do mask mandates, you can't do vaccine mandates, I won't allow it, but I'm going to take all the treatments when I got it, even though I don't need it. Why? Is he scared of the virus? Is he scared of it? Was he some sort of little bitch? Oh, you're scared? Oh, you're scared of the coronavirus? Are you? What happened, tough guy? Now, of course, logical people are concerned enough about the virus to take precautions, like wearing the mask and getting the vaccine. But he gets it. And of course, he doesn't follow the mask thing himself, even though he did get a vaccine. And now he's like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I gotta get the Regeneron. I gotta get the third. I gotta get the booster. I gotta get the booster. I thought there was no reason to be alarmed by the COVID surge. I mean, just last month, he said, don't worry about the hospitals. Don't worry about COVID, the COVID spike. It's fine. We have abundant capacity. In reality, of course, they do not have abundant capacity. In fact, According to Mark Casanova, a palliative care specialist in Dallas and a member of the Texas Medical Association's COVID-19 task force, quote, "We are entering the worst surge in sheer numbers. This is the fourth round of what should have been a 3-round fight. We do have a very sincere concerns that the numbers game is going to overwhelm us." Again, between 93 to 98% of hospitalized COVID patients, depending on the area, are unvaccinated in Texas, according to officials. With just under half of Texans fully vaccinated, the state has still some 16 million people who have yet to be protected from the virus. And they are, of course, filling up the state's intensive care units incredibly rapidly. In Dallas County alone on Monday, only 16 ICU beds were available to serve a county of 2.6 million and its surrounding areas. The day before that, it was 12. But hey, maybe they can find space to give Governor Abbott some Regeneron. No problem. Can do. Look, the big problem with Abbott, well, other than the hypocrisy, of course, is the fact that he's stopping businesses from and schools from doing mask and vaccine mandates. Right now, kids can't be vaccinated. They should be wearing masks in the schools. And look, again, it doesn't work if not enough people are wearing them. And that's the thing. Texans can't even make sure their kids are protected in the schools. But this is in the context, of course, of Abbott taking a third vaccine and even without any symptoms getting Regeneron. Ridiculous. It totally reeks of complete and total hypocrisy. The second he thinks he might be even a tiny little bit in danger, despite, of course, making the choice to go out unmasked in a crowd and fighting against masks, well, then he runs to get the cocktail, the same one that Donald Trump got, which, by the way, is 70% effective at keeping you from developing symptoms, serious symptoms. Symptoms that would require hospitalization. Whereas, again, the vaccine, 95%. How sad. Very, very sad. He doesn't give a damn about his own people, about his own constituents dying. It's all about caring about himself, his own life, and his own political power. What a sick person. It's like the Trumps when they had their own personal ventilators. All right. Florida schools shutting down. Wonder why. Yeah. All right. Will there be a cyber symposium to clarify the Republican view on COVID? Interesting question. Maybe Mike Pillow will headline it. Because his original cyber symposium worked so well. Okay. Let's move on. Representative Lauren Boebert could be in a little bit of trouble. On Wednesday, local news station KDVR and the Associated Press reported that Boebert had failed to disclose her income that her husband had made from an energy firm while she was running for Congress. So now, of course, you have pretty strict reporting requirements when you're running for office, as well as for how you use money that you have raised for your campaign funds. That's the other part of this. But first, in paperwork filed with the House of Representatives on Tuesday, Republican Congresswoman reported that her husband, Jason Boebert, received the money as a consultant to something called Terra Energy Productions in 2020 and earned $460,000 as a consultant for the firm in 2019. Interesting. But hey, you don't understand. Lauren Boebert, she's one of us guys. She's one of the working class. No, No, she's not. Never has been. Look, her husband, $500,000 almost in consulting fees for an energy firm. It's all part of the grift. And she's never planned on representing the actual working class in Colorado. So now, Boebert did not report the income last year when she first ousted Republican Representative Scott Tipton during the GOP primary in Colorado's 3rd district, and then went on to win the general election in the Republican-leaning district. But I guess in the midst of all that, she just must have forgot. Oh, that near $500,000 slipped her mind. Oops. What do you know? I just forgot. I forgot. But it gets more interesting. An important point that is in this article is that there's actually no company called Terra Energy Productions. So they kind of had to do a little bit of guesswork here and found Terra Energy Partners, which happens to be a Texas-based gas firm that operates wells in Boebert's district. So that seems to track. So that, okay, Terra Energy Productions, Terra Energy Partners, yeah, same thing. They're a big gas firm. Oh, look at that. They tend to operate in her area. So once again, that tracks. So he could definitely be a consultant for that company. So not surprisingly, as a result of this, or very likely as a result of this, Lauren Boebert happens to be massively against climate legislation. Now, look, you all saw the IPCC report. Now, doom and gloom for everybody. Disaster that is not only here, but more disaster that is on its way. We don't do something about oil and gas and switch to alternative energy sources. You phase out coal. And so now, of course, when it comes to doing that, unsurprisingly, she is voting against that, voting against, of course, infrastructure. One of the Republicans who's going to go against the reconciliation bill, of course. That's why it has to be in reconciliation, because it would never pass a Republican filibuster. And so, of course, she would vote against that in the House as well. So now that report also comes the same week that the FEC is investigating Boebert's apparent personal use of campaign funds. So we're not done here. Now this includes multiple Venmo payments totaling $6,000. $6,000. No need to add any more zeros to that. That Boebert had since acknowledged as an error. Oh, I just accidentally sent $6,000 to people. I don't know how that happened. Yes, I know it happens to me all the time. It's just randomly Venmo people money. I wish I got randomly Venmoed $6,000. That'd be fantastic. All right, anyway. Now, she has also faced questions about the amount of reimbursement she takes from her campaign for travel, as she expensed 38,712 miles of driving during 3 months of campaigning. So, oh man, look, I know, Colorado, and not exactly the biggest state in the union, not like Texas or anything like that, but all right. 38,000 miles. Are you sure about that one? Why do I ask? Because it happens to be more than the circumference of the earth. I doubt you did that in 3 months of campaigning. Just saying. Just saying. Now, it should be clear by now, at least to me it is, that Lauren Boebert does not represent the working class. I think she's in it for herself. I think she wants to make lots of money. I think she wants to raise her status, become a GOP celebrity. And, well, it appears that some of her voters might have actually caught on. In fact, there was an article, I think it's about last month, that it came out in Politico. This is from Jennifer Oldham, who spoke to people in her district. Some of them who obviously didn't vote for her, but some of them who did, and now have some regrets. Interesting. Now, some of them say that they're angry that she appears to have spent more time headlining GOP fundraisers than hosting public meetings to listen to their needs. They also say that she has failed to push for policy that would help the community, like Biden's infrastructure plan, for example, and also had voted against the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, that had some pretty popular provisions in it, including direct aid, direct checks to Americans. Turns out that's actually a really popular policy when you give people money. And she voted against it, of course. Now, she says, well, I'm going against Biden's infrastructure because it's too expensive. We can't afford it in this country. Really? But we can afford, of course, to give tax cuts to the rich. Interesting. But no, I think it's because that $3.5 trillion reconciliation package has provisions in it addressing climate change, which includes a reduction of oil, gas, and coal, and an increase, of course, in renewable energy sources. But here's the thing. Her family, her income, literally relies on consulting fees from oil and gas companies. And so I no wonder they didn't file. It seems like it's a little bit of a conflict of interest, or more so, it just looks bad. If people pay attention and think, oh, wait a minute. Oh, you actually represent oil and gas, and that's why you're not going to pass the infrastructure. So that's why you're not in favor of infrastructure that will help our community. Well, then I guess you're just working for yourself here, and you're not actually representing us. This kind of reminds me of the story of Rand Paul. Now, Rand Paul also somehow failed to disclose his wife's stock trades. That made him a lot of money. Weird. Not only that, but you also have Joe Manchin, who has investments in fossil fuels that are actually end up being twice his congressional salary. Well, you know, going back to her husband's consulting fees, that's also double her congressional salary. Gee, I wonder why they, want to hide these things. They don't want to talk about them. Interesting. Look, it's corruption. This is the personal finances of these politicians informing or supporting their policy positions. And that's where the corruption comes from. There's probably, to be fair, a 99% chance that she wouldn't have voted in favor of climate change legislation anyway without that money. But the money being there makes it a 100% chance that she'd never support climate legislation, even if, the entire West was on fire. I mean, at least there was the 1% chance, but now it's kind of like that old Upton Sinclair quote, which reads, "It's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it." Well, again, that's a lot of people in Congress. As I mentioned, Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, a lot of Republicans, just about all the Republican Party, and a lot of corporate Democrats as well fall into that category. And so, lo and behold, those people who are paid off by, for example, oil and gas are going to be against climate legislation. People who are paid off by pharmaceutical companies and healthcare companies, health insurance firms, well, of course, they're going to be against nationalizing insurance, healthcare insurance for people, and, making sure, guaranteeing that everybody can have healthcare. And so it's that situation. It's that corruption that is endemic in the system. And Lauren is just another one of those people who are taking public service and actually using it to serve herself. Not supposed to be that way, but with our broken system, with money in politics, that's the way it ends up being. And that's why we have to get the money out of politics. Okay. Let's move on. One more story here. Then I'm outie. All right. Go to Black Lives Matter. Oh, I already have that up. Good stuff. A report released Wednesday by the racial justice organization, the Movement for Black Lives, finds that the Justice Department under President Donald Trump had intentionally targeted BLM protesters with prosecutions in order to, of course, disrupt their movement, their movement for Black Lives. Now, the report, which was first shared by the with the Associated Press, was conducted in partnership with the Creating Law Enforcement Accountability and Responsibility Clinic at the City University of New York School of Law. Based on analysis of 326 criminal cases filed by federal prosecutors in connection with the protests from May 31st to October 25th of last year, the groups found that much of the drive to use federal charges against protesters stemmed from top-down directives from Donald Trump and former Attorney General William Barr. So I don't think that we're all surprised by this, but they say that these directives were meant to disrupt the movement and were the primary reason for the unprecedented federalization of protest-related prosecutions seen in 2020. So, I wonder if there's any reason they wanted to do that. Can anybody think of it? Oh, right. They hate black people. It's racism. And look, they also wanted to punish people calling for black people just to not get shot and killed by police if they're unarmed, which we have seen happen over and over and over and over again. Again, Tamir Rice, Eric Garner, Walter Scott, George Floyd, on and on. The list goes on. Oh, but Tamir Rice, as we start, he had a toy gun. He had a toy. And look, they literally shot him within 3 seconds. Not even enough time to say, oh, drop the weapon, which didn't even turn out to be a real gun. If everybody's buying that, I mean, that, oh, he was dangerous. Come on. All right, so now here's the thing. The DOJ under Trump did not want to solve that problem. They didn't want to hear about that problem because in their minds, what the police did in all those circumstances that led to the deaths of innocent people were correct. And that goes to, of course, the systemic problem where Black lives are not, they don't matter to people, which is, again, the whole reason that we have Black Lives Matter, to remind people that they do. But again, for them, they think, well, of course, having an unarmed black person, of course, they deserve to be shot. So, yes, even if they have a toy gun, or even if they have no gun, no weapon, even if they're running away, that's okay. We can shoot them in the back. Don't you know how dangerous they are? No, you're dangerous. You're the one shooting people. You're the ones running around with access to heavy weaponry, oftentimes, and a badge that lets you shoot anybody, and qualified immunity. You're the danger. Again, the officer that killed Daniel Shaver, that's Philip Brailsford, literally had an AR-15 weapon with "you're fucked" carved into the barrel. That's what we have. That's what we have. All right. So no, they are dangerous. And unfortunately, because of the qualified immunity, and of course the federal government, people like William Barr and of course Trump and Republicans mainly, it's still quite rare for police to be held accountable for what they're doing. For every Derek Chauvin that does get held accountable, you still have Philip Brailsford's, Daniel Pantaleo, who's the guy who choked out Eric Garner, the officers who killed Tamir Rice, or the one's responsible for killing Breonna Taylor, not getting held accountable for their deaths. Look, some of those people in certain cases, they might lose their job and then get hired somewhere else. But the important thing is that they don't really ever see the inside of a courtroom, because you have grand juries that decide, oh no, we're not even going to bring them in for charges, no indictments, or they get let off by our justice system. And so you have this mindset, these people that have this racism inherent in the system and defend it, and end up targeting Black Americans who are just trying to fight for their lives. But there's more. The organizations also noted that the DOJ and the directives, as well as statements about the protests, would paint the image of protesters as violent radicals, and the government justified the expanded use of its authority and deployment of federal enforcement due to what it claimed was local and state leaders' abdication of their law enforcement responsibilities in deference to this quote-unquote violent assault. Violent assault. So, again, we saw that not only with the Trump administration, of course, painting them as, oh, super violent and, oh, dangerous, terrible, but, of course, Fox News. Of course, Fox News would show the same, like, burning, what is it, Arby's or something in the background every time they talk about BLM. 93% of the protests were entirely peaceful. And yet they showed the same thing over and over again, the same footage. Why? Because they're pushing a narrative. They're pushing that narrative, which again, of course, gets picked up by Donald Trump, or I don't know, vice versa. But there is this, I don't know, this weird like circle jerk vampirism kind of thing going on between, at that time, the White House and Fox News and the Justice Department, where I guess he would get his talking points from Fox News and then go enact actual policy based on that. Fox News says, oh, black people protesting against police brutality, dangerous radicals. And he says, well, I got to send the military. I have no choice. No choice. No choice. But here's the thing. Again, millions of people marched for Black lives. 93% peaceful. Vast majority. And of course, this is in the face of, in a lot of places, overwhelming police presence. And sometimes police force, where police would actually, they would start this. They would start moving in on these protesters. They would start this violence. They would initiate it. And they, of course, would, kidnap people off the streets. Journalists would be arrested. Entire groups of people killed, and pelted with pepper balls and beanbag rounds and tear gas and all this stuff that would happen. And you want to tell me that the people who were protesting were the only violent ones? I'm not saying that there wasn't violence in these protests, but in the vast majority of the situations where there was violence, it was initiated by the police. Not all of them, but the majority of them. And this was, again, by design. And then to go in, and this is where it gets worse. Among other key findings was that the government had also exploited the vast, expansive criminal code in order to assert federal jurisdiction in cases that bore no federal interest. Noting that in nearly 93% of the criminal cases, there were similar state-level charges that could have been brought against the defendants. Of these cases where state crimes could have instead been filed, 88% of the federal charges had a more severe potential punishment than they would have at the state level. So the federal government comes in, and what about states' rights, right? The federal government comes in and says, oh no, we got this. Arrests people and then charges them with even harsher punishments than the state and local level would have charged them. You know why? It's because this wasn't about restoring order. Understand, this isn't about peaceful, keeping protests peaceful and punishing people who are rioters and things like that. No, this is about taking people and sending a message. That message is, if you try to hold police accountable and try to protect Black lives, we're coming for you. And we're going to throw the book at you. We're going to overcharge you with crimes. And by the way, a lot of the crimes would be like disorderly conduct or resisting arrest. That's a famous one. But they do that, overcharge people, and take charges to such ridiculous heights in order to make a point, a political point. And that point is, of course, bow your head, never challenge the police or the government when they are doing something wrong and harming these communities of color. So now, there's a statement here from the Movement for Black Lives. They said in a response to this, quote, the empirical data and findings in this report largely corroborate what Black organizers have long known intellectually, intuitively, and from lived experience about the federal government's disparate policing and prosecution of racial justice protests and related activity. So, of course, they've known all along. Anybody who's been paying attention does. But understand that there's a lot of people out there that haven't paid attention, that aren't aware of this, that aren't aware of the disparate, policing and persecution, prosecution of people that are fighting for racial justice. Those are the people that need to be informed. And look, there's a couple different types of people who are not informed. There's the ones who, just generally haven't experienced this. They don't know this. They're unaware. And once they're brought aware to this, are like, oh, wow, I can't believe this was happening. Maybe we should do something about this. And we saw a lot of that, of course, after the death of George Floyd, where you had a lot of people that ended up joining and agreeing that his death was unjust. And that's how we ended up, of course, getting a conviction on the murder, on the person who murdered George Floyd. But the other people are the ones who know about this or find out about this and think, don't care. Don't care. I already don't like Black people. I think it's perfectly fine that the police are doing what they're doing. Defend the police, thin blue line. Well, then we have no use for you. And you're not real allies. And you're not in favor of actual civil rights or America. All right. So, that's all I got for you today. I'm sorry I ran a little late here. I just want to give a couple of shout outs here. Finley's mom, thank you for subscribing with Prime. SBloom85, thank you for resubbing at Tier 1. Appreciate it. Thank you for all the new follows as well. Let's go here to Super Chats real quick. And I know I have to open it up. Go. And let's see. Gabby Mathis, thank you for the very kind $5. And Murray Perkins, thank you for the $10. Really appreciate it. Everybody, please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Like and share the clips. Very helpful if you do so. Subscribe if you haven't already to our YouTube channel. Like us on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter, Jeff's Politics. Want to support the show another way? We do have a Patreon page. Don't want to get Jeff Bezos involved or give money to Google. You can go to our Patreon. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf. Check that out and become a patron. Support the show. All right, everybody. Love you all. Thank you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, everybody.
Are you kicking me out the door?
Please clap.
Mike Pounds.
Dumps. Big, massive dumps.
Oh, no!
Please clap.
Are you kicking me out the door? You're kicking me out the door.